Tonight we're going to be going back to Revelation chapter 10. We just started Revelation chapter 10 last time, and I talked a little bit about the angel coming down from heaven, and part of what we looked at is the fact that this isn't Jesus. And the reason I drive that home is because if you just start looking at, oh look, he's got a rainbow, a face like the sun, feet like pillars of fire, and you go, wait a minute, that sounds similar to what the description of Jesus was at the very start, the Son of Man. But we compared that to also the angel that came down in Daniel, and we see the description there. And the reason I did that, again, is because we don't want to suddenly start lumping things in based on what we think. We want to see what the text says. And the other thing that's a dead giveaway that this isn't Jesus, it says angel. Never in the scriptures is Jesus ever confused with an angel. And John wouldn't make that mistake. So this is an angel who is coming down, and he's coming down with a scroll in his hand. Now, depending on your translation there, it may translate it as book, and it's more than likely because the translator is trying to make sure that you're not confusing this with the earlier scroll. This is something a little different. Now, I'm going to jump a little bit here because it just makes it easier because of the way it goes here. He's coming down with a scroll that is opened. And this is important, especially if you compare it to the end of the book of Daniel. At the end of the book of Daniel, now Daniel also speaks about things that are to come and makes it clear in this aspect. Daniel 9 does this with the 70 weeks of Daniel when it depicts the 70th week. And you can kind of derive some things there. Now, Daniel doesn't talk about what's going to happen during that 70th week as much. He kind of goes at the start of it and then jumps to the end of it, particularly chapters 10, 11, and 12. Particularly talks about the Antichrist gathering at the plains of Megiddo. Also Armageddon, that's where his camp is. That lines up quite well with Revelation. But at the end of Daniel, just a note here, Ezekiel, Daniel is given a kind of a command, and Daniel chapter 12, I'm going to go verse 8 and 9. It says this: although I heard, I did not understand. Then I said, my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. In other words, this is sealing away. So this angel came and delivered the message to Daniel. Daniel wants to know, hey, can you give me a little more detail? When's this going to happen? And he's basically told, that's not for you, Daniel. Seal it for now. And yet, what you have here in Revelation is an angel coming down, and this scroll isn't sealed. It is open in his hand. In other words, it's now for the time for it to be declared. And yeah, there's really no reason to doubt that this is any different than the scroll that's referenced in Daniel. It's the scroll of the end. And remember, Daniel's job was he was proclaiming these things, to teach these things, but he was ultimately told, seal it. John here is going to be the opposite. Not only is he not told to seal this, he's told to proclaim it. And that's symbolically shown by the fact that he's told to eat it. Now, this is one of those things that in Revelation, there are some things that are visible from the earth, and then there's things that are visible only in heaven. This is one of those things that's not visible on earth. There are plenty of things in Revelation that's written from the heavenly perspective. This one is just kind of a pause in the whole thing, and John is told, hey, you're going to take this scroll. So this scroll is the message that John's supposed to proclaim. It's the revelation that he's supposed to proclaim. And we'll deal with that for a second. But the angel who shows up, I said I'm going to be jumping here a bit in this text because it's easier to teach that way. The angel shows up, and the first thing he does when he lands, if you want that term, it kind of sounds like that. It just says he sets his foot on the sea and on his foot on the land. And we covered that by saying this means it's a totality. The message is for everybody kind of thing. But it says, then he cries out with a loud voice as when a lion roars. That's all it is, just a lion roars out. And to understand this, I'm going to borrow here from the prophet Amos. Amos chapter 3, verse 7 and 8, because this fits. It says, surely the Lord God does nothing unless he reveals his secret to his servants, the prophets. Now, I'm going to side note here. This is not a verse that can be used the way that modern false prophets use it today. Because many false prophets say, see, God told me this, and then he can't do it until he has told me that this is what he's going to do. And this is why you have people who set false dates for things. Because they're like, well, though God's telling people today. Why? Well, because he won't do anything unless he reveals it. You see the problem that they're trying to claim? But leave it in the context. So, surely the Lord God is nothing unless he reveals his secret to his servant the prophets. A lion has roared, who will not fear? The Lord God has spoken, who can but prophesy? This is directly related to what John is about to get. Because what is he getting? An angel shows up, and the first thing he does is he roars like a lion. With a loud voice as when a lion roars. And what is the angel coming to do? To give John the prophetic message. The lion roars, God has spoken, what can you do but prophesy? And that was John's job. Now, we touched on that last week, but here's where we kind of left off. It says, when he cried out, 7 thunders uttered their voices. Now, when the 7 thunders uttered their voices, a voice I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, seal up the things which the 7 thunders uttered, and do not write them. Now, this is interesting. What does this have to do? It's kind of a strange event. And you can kind of run into a problem here. So the one question we're going to have to run into, is this 7 here literal or symbolic? Throughout Revelation, you kind of have to make the decision sometimes, is this a literal number or is this a symbolic number? For example, when it talks about the 7 spirits of God. So when it talks about God the Father on the throne, the Lamb comes in before the throne, and before the throne is the 7 spirits of God, the lampstand, the 7th lampstand, which is the 7 spirits of God. Is it talking about 7 different spirits, or is the number 7 there being used to symbolize completeness and wholeness? And so in that case, it's more likely it's completeness, wholeness, that the fullness of the Spirit of God. And we compared that to the Old Testament as well. But then you get the 7 seals and the 7 trumpets and the 7 bowls. These don't seem symbolic. Because especially when you've got them, it says, okay, so the angels came and they blew the totality of the trumpets. And each angel is blowing the totality of the trumpets. It doesn't work. Because it clearly says the angel blew the first trumpet and the second trumpet. And so you've got different 7s here. So the question that we have to ask is this 7 symbolic, saying the full of the heavens thunders, or the fullness of the thunders have spoken, or is it 7 voices, such as the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, the 7 bowls? The other question is this just they make a proclamation, or is this another set of 7 that's not recorded? In other words, like the 7 seals each had something come, the 7 trumpets or judgments. Are the 7 thunders speaking one voice, or are they 7 judgments that we're not told of? In all honesty,
we don't know.
Yeah, don't know. And we don't have to know. God doesn't have to tell us everything. If he wants to hold something back, he can hold something back. And I can make an argument for both of those statements, that yeah, it's another set of 7s, and it's also, or it's just as well, it's a completeness that they're all speaking in one voice. I don't know. John was told, do not write this down. So we have no idea what they proclaimed. The second is we don't even know if it's going to be 7 sevens, if it's going to be them all speaking at once, or did they each answer something right after? Don't know. And that's okay. This is one of the things I think we have to understand. We can run into the problem when we study the scriptures where we want to fill in the gaps. We want to fill in details, and we can often get into very much trouble this way. Especially when you start making one of the weakest of logical arguments called the argument from silence. Where, well, it doesn't say this. And I pointed that out one time because one of the things that we had to do in homiletics, it's just a fancy word for preaching class, you have to do regular things like funeral, wedding, do sermons. We had to do children's stories. And you had one or two who were like, I don't want to do a children's story. And then one person put forth the argument, it was never recorded that Jesus did a children's story. All I said back was, it's not recorded he didn't. Like, well, you can't say that. I said, exactly, and you can't make the same claim. I was like, I'm using the same argument. I'm not saying he didn't, I'm not saying he didn't. Kind of thing. And so when we come to something like this, the seven thunders, we have to be content to say, we don't know. Not sure. That there's ambiguity here. Now, I'm not saying there's ambiguity in the Christian faith. I'm just saying there are certain times like this on a matter that truthfully has no bearing on the faith that we can go, I don't know. It was interesting because a couple of weeks ago, I was just talking with Mom. I said, in the events, because I was reading Exodus, and we're probably familiar with this, Moses is placed in the basket, led along the reeds, ends up where the Pharaoh's daughter is, and gets up, and then all of a sudden Miriam is there saying, hey, do you want me to get one of the Hebrew women who's nursing to take care of this child? My question was, where did Miriam come from?
She'd been following along.
Or did she, or was she already in the service of the princess? That's the question. We just fill in, why? Because from movies, right?
Well, I had a picture in my Bible.
Exactly.
That's it.
It's a photograph.
and that's my point. Like, we try to fill in details. And you can make an argument for both. I'm like, well, the fact that she walks up to the princess and has no problem addressing her would almost indicate she's been there. She's familiar with her. And it's also even possible, like it or not, that Miriam's the one who went and pulled her own brother out of the stream. Because it says she sent a servant to go get it. We don't know. But we have this need. It's like, I want to fill in details. And the worst part is we can get so caught on those that we think those details are biblical. And we've got to learn. It's like, you know what? We don't need those details. This is why you have people who are fascinated with what's called the infancy gospels. And what those are, they're pseudepigraphal writings that try to depict Jesus' childhood life, such as Jesus killed a bird and brought it back to life, kind of thing. And people are like, see? It's like, no. People want that, but this is a case you just go, you know what? We don't know. We have no idea. I imagine there's probably, when the time comes, that it's going to be made known. Why do I think that? Because if it wasn't, it makes almost no sense to even put the detail in. If it's something that we're not even going to know, it's like, well, the seven thunders, well, what are the seven thunders? Like, why put it in there? But there are times where it's all right to say, you know what? I don't have a clue. This is one of those things. I have no idea. It could be speaking in one accord. They could speak one right after the other, or it could just be another set of seven judgments in this time frame, which would not be unheard of. So when it comes to the seven thunders, don't ask me. I don't know. All I know is they did something, and John was told, don't write it, seal it, and leave it alone. Then the angel, who says, I saw standing on the sea, on the land, raised up his hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever, and who created heaven and the things that are in it, the earth and the things that are in it, and the sea and the things that are in it, that there should be no delay, no longer. This is really just a oath-swearing ceremony, is what it is. He looked to heaven, raised his hands, and he's making an oath. We've probably heard these all through Scripture in various ways. It's like, surely as the Lord lives, blank, kind of thing. And since the angels has this oath-swearing ceremony, he's doing it by the Lord. And he drives home the one who lives forever and ever, created heaven and the things in it, the earth and the things are in it, the seas, the things are in it. Now, why would that be so important? Because one of the things that we run into in today's culture is the idea that God would be wrong if he suddenly turned all the waters to blood and killed all the fish in it. And they're like, see, that's wrong. He's just slaughtering them all. What are they forgetting? Something that's so mightily important.
They're his.
Yeah. He owns it. The angel's making this clear. He's the one who made the skies. He's the one who made the seas. He's the one who made the lands. He's the owner of all of it. And it's his right to do what he sees fit. That's the point. And it's something I think we have to acknowledge. You may not like it, but it's the fact. This would be like if somebody who really loves classic cars and say, I can't stand them, but I just happen to have tons of money to burn. I don't. And I decide to go and I find a classic car and I buy it, and then the next thing I do is I put it in a demolition derby. And people can go, I hate that. So what? It's mine. If I wanted to do that, I can do that. If I wanted to take it and crush it down to a cube and put it on my desk as a paperweight, that's my prerogative. You can think I'm foolish or whatnot, but you have no right to say otherwise. Now I'm just using human examples there. But everything is the Lord's. And so if he decides to pour out his judgments, that is his right. And so he makes this proclamation. Now, he makes the proclamation, but he says, now here's an interesting detail. But in the days of the sounding of the seventh angel, when he is about to sound, the mystery of God would be finished, as he declared to his servants, the prophets. Now, there's a couple of things here. So, the timing of it. Now, this is one of the things I'll probably get into more detail here probably next week, and I'm going to mess with the timeline. Not in a time travel kind of way, but what I mean by that is if you look at charts that people make, and I'm sure you can find them. They're usually big, long, complicated, that kind of thing. Like I've watched the old movies. When I say the old movies, I'm talking like Thief in the Night, A Distant Thunder, that set of 4 movies. And even in there, you've got a guy who's not a believer, but he lives like in a hole in the ground in a shelter, and he comes out and he pulls out like this big, long paper of like, this is the timeline, it's exactly what's going to happen, that kind of thing. And the truth is, it's one of those things that we don't know. I'm going to tell you right now, the timeline for that, we don't know how things are. And I've spent a lot of this week, when I was preparing for this, also trying to get my head around some things. Like one of the questions that comes up is, that I was dealing with is, in chapter 11, it talks about the 2 witnesses. When do they do their ministry? It's an important question because according to some timelines, they start at the beginning and then they stop at the midway point. And as I studied this, when we get to it, I can give a really good explanation to show you that there is actually a big long pause between the 6th trumpet and the 7th trumpet. That the 6th trumpet is blown, and then that is when the witnesses come in. And then for that period, the 7th trumpet is actually, the last trumpet. And part of it, and the reason I'm telling you that is because part of this detail here that is given. See, when they divide the timelines, what a lot like to do is take the 7 years and they divide it 2 ways. The first way is 3.5, 3.5. Tribulation, great tribulation. But then they also do for lack of better words, a trimester kind of way. The first trimester is the 6 seals. The second trimester is the 7 trumpets. And then the third trimester is the 7 bowls. And they keep those equally. But what's said here, I think, kind of can throw that into a bit of a problem. What do I mean by that? Is what he says here is that there's going to be no more delay, but in the days of the sounding of the seventh angel. It's the wording of this that kind of gets me a little bit. The NIV translates it a little different than the King James. One will say, in the days of the sounding. The other one says, when he's about to sound. Those are little differences. And what it seems to be is that the seventh angel, when he blows his trumpet, the mystery is complete. The judgment is come. And so I will argue, and again, you're free to disagree on this. This isn't hard written in stone, because I'm not infallible, that the seven bowl judgments aren't spread out like they think. I think they're bang, 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 one right after the other. It is God just pouring out his wrath quickly. And the seven angels are quick in this. So instead of it being, 7 divided by 3, what is that? 2 and 1 and something, 170 or something like that. Someone can do the math. I'm not doing it off the top of my head right now. I think it's a lot shorter time frame than that. And it's interesting because even the Left Behind, when it gets to the bowls, they kind of go, wait a minute, this one's for a time frame, 6 months or whatnot, because they're trying to fit it into a time frame. Where it seems to me that the seventh trumpet is the last trumpet as God pours out his wrath. And in between the sixth trumpet and the seventh trumpet, you get the two witnesses. And one of the things that kind of does this, and I'll come back to it next year, is when you notice at the end of chapter 9, or the midpoint of chapter 9, the fifth trumpet is blown, look at verse 12. What's it say? One woe is past. Right? Verse 12 of chapter 9. I'm going to jump here quickly just into chapter 11. As I said, we'll come back to it another time. Look at chapter 11 and read verse 14. And tell me what it says.
Second woe.
The second woe has passed.
Third.
So one woe has passed. Why is it that the second woe is after the witnesses? And it directly connects it to them. It doesn't separate them. If the second woe was just the horsemen, the demonic horsemen, that's where you would expect it to say the second woe is past. Why put it after the witnesses? Unless there's a connection to the sixth trumpet. So in other words, the interruption or the interlude is just chapter 10, not chapter 10 and chapter 11. And that fits because what is about to come is very, we'll say, harsh things for the believer. Up until this point, in Revelation, what's one thing that has been clear? The believers are protected. They have the seal of God. Remember, they asked the question, the wrath of the Lamb has come, who can stand? And it's like, well, how can anybody stand against these horrible things? And it's like, well, there is. Who? Those who are sealed by Christ. But now, after this point, after the sixth trumpet, before the others come, you're going to run into a spot where you run into, like, the beast is coming. These witnesses who are, for now, we'll say are God's champions, are overpowered. They're killed. You got a beast who's arising. He's persecuting the believers. He's killing them. He's seeming from a worldly point to have victory over them. Does that sound like a message that people are going to want to hear? Does that sound like a message that John is going to want to deliver? He's not. But it is the very message that John has to deliver. Why? Because he's being given this scroll, which is the mysteries of God that are about to come to pass. And he's told to take it. His instructions are to take it and to eat it. He's eating this scroll. He's sealing the seven thunders, but this scroll that he takes from the angels, he says, he goes, go take the little book which is open in the hand of the angel who stands on the sea of the earth. I went and I took the book, and he said to me, take and eat it. And it will make your stomach bitter, but it will be as sweet as honey in your mouth. Then I took the little book out of the angel's hand, and I ate it, and it was as sweet as honey in my mouth. But when I had eaten it, when I eat it, my stomach became bitter. And he said to me, you must now prophesy again about many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. This is what he was to do. This is not something pleasant. He's told to eat it, and he was to proclaim it. This isn't the only time this happens in the scripture. We see this Ezekiel as well. Eat this because this is the message that you are going to be proclaimed. And for a believer, enjoying the words of God should be sweet to them. But it doesn't mean they're going to like to proclaim it. In fact, they're called to proclaim it even when nobody else is listening. I think that's why I marked Ezekiel here. Just give me a second. Ezekiel chapter 2. I wrote myself a verse here. No, that's chapter 3, that's why. Yep. Verse 7 is just here. You shall speak my words to them, whether they hear or whether they refuse, for they are rebellious. But you, son of man, hear what I say to you. Do not be rebellious like the rebellious house. Open your mouth and eat what I give you. In other words, he was told ahead of time, they're not going to listen to you. And in fact, they're probably going to detest you, hate you, persecute you. But you must proclaim it anyway. And in John's case, the message that he was to deliver, at that point, it's not going to sound like the message of hope. It's going to sound like a message of, wow, this is not going to be good, kind of thing. Let me put it in a human perspective here. A doctor, and I'm going to use a Christian doctor, is talking to a Christian person who is sick. And the doctor has to deliver the message, by all accounts, without divine intervention, you're going to die. And unfortunately, if it will say it's a cancer, the cancer is going to spread. It's going to make you weak. You're probably going to feel sick. This is what to expect. Does that sound like a good news message? Well, no. But why can it still be good news? Because when this is done, you will wake up face to face with Jesus. And there will be no more pain, no more sorrow, no more suffering. How does John end his book? Like this Spirit in the church say, come, and Jesus says, behold, I am coming soon. That's rejoicing. But for the first little while, we call it a bitter pill to swallow. This is what John is dealing with. He's like, this is the prophetic message. Being called as the messenger, that's going to be sweet in your mouth, but it's going to turn your stomach sour, and it's not going to be pleasant. And John, this is the message that you're going to have to proclaim. And it is one that will come to pass. Why? Because the angel said, he swore by the Lord, it will come to pass. Because when the seventh angel sounds, the mystery is going to be poured out. John, here's the scroll. Here's the prophetic word. Eat it, digest it, now proclaim it. And as bitter as it will be, you must proclaim it. And then you see what is to come. And so this is what Revelation 10 is about. Because if it just jumped to Revelation 11, we may be going, okay, what's going on here? Why is it? Is this really what God has in store? That the church, the believers of that time, if you want, are going to be persecuted. They're going to be hunted. The city of Jerusalem is going to be destroyed by earthquakes. there's a desolation that is coming, that there's this beast who's going to rise, this false prophet. They're going to forsake God. They're going to mock God. He's even going to call fire down from heaven, make everybody worship this idol or die. This is really what's going to come. How can this be good? This is by the decree of the sovereign God. It will come to pass. But do not fret, because his will be done. And his judgment will come to pass. And after all that, you see about this beast, you see about this dragon, all we got to do, flip to the end. What happens to him? That false prophet, that Antichrist, they are taken and thrown, they're only thrown alive into the lake of burning fire. They're going to get what's coming to them, and the believers who have been martyred are going to get their reward along with everybody else, because they will rise first. So that is the glorious message that is to be proclaimed. Even though part of it sounds bitter, for us, look to the end, because that's where the victory is. And we follow the example of Christ. He said, for the glory that is set before him, he endured the cross. For the victory that we know is won through Christ, we will endure the torments of this world. And in the end, well, we'll join the crowds and say, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. All right.